Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi everyone, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Art of Procurement. And today I have another in the series of 5 different interviews that I recorded back in early May at the Cooper Inspire conference in San Francisco. And my guest on the show today is Greg Tennyson. Greg's the Chief Procurement Officer of VSP Global, and VSP Global are the largest provider of vision insurance here in the United States. Prior to his role at VSP, Greg's also been the Chief Procurement Officer at a couple of leading Silicon Valley companies that I'm sure you've heard of, Salesforce and Oracle. Greg's also the founding member of the Bay Area Procurement Council. And in today's discussion, I really wanted to pick the mind of a CPO with regards to procurement talent and hiring. So I asked Greg if the so-called talent shortage is real and the skills that he looks for when he hires talent into his team. Greg also shares his views on what a procurement professional can do to stand out from the crowd and increase their chances of a promotion. This is a really interesting discussion for me because we talk a lot here on the Art of Procurement, but I also hear it spoken and written about elsewhere about the challenges in terms of procurement skill sets. So it was really insightful for me to ask a CPO and really understand what's going on the ground. All right, well, before we go into the show, I want to let you know that I recently published a new report, and it's called 50 Lessons from 50 Shows. So in this report, I share the 50 different lessons that I've learned talking to procurement thought leaders over the first 50 episodes of the Art of Procurement show. So if you're interested in grabbing a free copy of the report, you can just head on over to artofprocurement.com/50 lessons. That's artofprocurement.com/50 lessons. All right then, well, let's roll the tape. Well, welcome to the Art of Procurement today. And in the show, as I mentioned in the introduction, I'm really delighted to welcome Greg Tennyson, the CPO of VSP Global, to the show. So, Greg, welcome.
Thanks, Phil. Happy to be here.
Thanks. And today we're going to talk a little bit about talent shortages, skills, and also some of the things that you can do to stand out if you aspire to be a CPO. But before we do that, I have a first question, Greg, that I ask most of my guests, and that's, did you choose procurement? Did it choose you? How did you kind of come into the function?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm smiling. You can't see the smile on the audio, but I actually fell into procurement.
Yeah.
Sharing too much of my history, but I graduated university in '82. Very tough job market. First opportunity was sales, and selling a commodity, if you will, to a very hard, difficult market. And I realized right away I didn't like being on that side of the desk. Then took an administrative role, and part of that administrative role was the introduction to contracts, procurement, buying. Yeah. And that's why I say it was purely by accident I fell into the role. But I knew right away, the art of procurement. I love negotiating. I love partnering with the business and understanding their objectives, what their needs are, and driving that value proposition for them. So early in my career, I was exposed to procurement, contracts, and just fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And 30 years later, sitting here with you.
Still here.
Yeah.
So how has it evolved over time?
Wow. Night and day. I mean, we used to talk about requisitioning, paper recs, getting approvals, paper recs sitting in somebody's physical inbox, having them approve it, in the natural delays, the lack of visibility, accountability, night and day difference. Very manual, paper-intensive process. Boy, you're dredging up some history to today where, it really has moved the lever, the needle to be more digitized. We're not there yet.
Right.
But, with eSig, with the technology, with the, e-procurement, the Indian solutions, the e-invoicing, evaluated receipt settlement, a lot of functionality now. Not only functionality, but the discipline has changed dramatically. The skill set required to play the role is entirely different. More consultative. And it really requires a broader skill set. Back in the day, 30 years ago, it was all about consummating the transaction. Now it's about building partnership, building relationships. It's being more of a generalist from having a finance background, having a manufacturing, demand planning, supply chain background, having a contracts background. So to be successful, in my opinion, it requires the individual to be much more diverse, a generalist rather than a specialist.
Okay, interesting. So has the role of a CPO in the boardroom, or the way that the boardroom looks at the role of the CPO, has that changed? Do they have different expectations today?
Yeah, at some point over the last 30 years, the CPO became less and less a buyer, and you're a salesperson. You're selling. You're constantly selling within the organization, building relationships, building credibility, delivering value. So it takes an entirely different skill set. And if you haven't leveraged off that inflection point to develop those skills, those are the individuals that get jettisoned, right? Because they couldn't keep pace. But it's an entirely different skill set 30 years ago versus today. Yeah,
and ironically, I mean, maybe this is just me speaking from personal experience, I found myself on the buying side because the selling side was hard, and it was something that was difficult to do. And when you're starting your career buying, you suddenly have all this quote unquote power because you have these relationships to manage, this spend to manage. So turning the corner to then be essentially a salesperson is a difficult leap for a procurement professional, or at least it was for me.
Yeah, interesting. You think about, so I agree with you 100%. So I was on the buying side, loved being in the power seat in negotiations. But as I reflect on those 30 years, 3 decades of experience, I realize that it's more about relationship, and it's about selling, even to a supplier. If you look at a supplier engagement as if you're buying from that supplier, you've missed it. You need to invest. You need to sell, build a relationship, because there will be those phone calls. I can tell you with Coupa, the procurement tool that we implemented back in 2009, having the relationship with, at the time, the 3 founders, and being able to pick up the phone call, having their mobile to get things resolved, was because of the relationship, not because I was a buyer.
Right. When you fast forward to today, it may be your personal biggest challenges, it may be the biggest challenges that you hear from CPOs with which you network with. What are the biggest challenges that you're hearing about?
So it's interesting. I mean, the whole conversation around talent shortage within the procurement space, I've heard that conversation now probably for the last 5, maybe 10 years. And I think what's missing is people need to get creative on how they go after it. So when I look to hire, I'm not looking for a procurement professional. I'm maybe looking to hire a GD grad, somebody recent graduate of law school, somebody with a finance background, somebody on the supply chain side, somebody that was in sales. Right? So it does require you to be more creative. It does require greater investment in the individual to ramp them. But the output, the result is that you get potentially a better rounded person that addresses, a talent shortage within your team. You'll never have the perfect hire, so it's a matter of compromise and really understanding the deficiencies, or let's say talent shortage within the team, and how you can enhance the mix. So if you are lacking from a contract review, redlining perspective, go out and hire a JD. The risk is that you'll have greater churn because they'll be exposed to the opportunity, procurement, and their talent lies more in becoming general counsel somewhere, right? I look at it as making an investment, making that individual more rounded, getting them exposed to the procurement side, so they can then help evangelize the function wherever they go on to.
I was going to ask, isn't that important? If you're thinking long term, you then start to get people who have experienced procurement in the business, so they then become your advocate.
Right. not only at your company, but wherever they
for
land.
the profession.
Yeah,
because
it's the profession. Exactly.
We're all kind of in this together.
Yeah, definitely.
And so you talked about the talent shortage. Is that real? Is it something that we talk a lot about? Is it very specific based on job types?
Yeah, I hate the answer, but I'm going to give it to you anyways. It depends.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on the market that you're in, the skill that you're looking to hire, the talent that you're looking to hire, the level of the talent, the market that you're in. So San Francisco, high tech, I would agree there's a talent shortage.
Yeah.
So get creative. Maybe you take some of your function and put it in a remote setting, or you allow somebody to work virtual.
Yeah.
You look to other disciplines, other functions to bring a resource in, and then you round them out from your ramping of the talent, assimilation of skills, et cetera. Yeah. But just simply to say, there's a talent shortage and do nothing about it.
Right.
It's a naysayer attitude.
Yeah.
Get creative.
Is it because of the skill sets where there is the shortages? Is it because we're evolving and we haven't, a lot of the profession hasn't moved at the speed of change? Or is it, again, I guess it may be situational because just we're in a market that is at the top of the cycle in terms of hiring. It's just difficult to get people, period, not necessarily good people.
Yeah, so again, it depends. I look back at my prior company, and I had an engineer playing a procurement role. Mm-hmm. I had somebody in finance in the team. I had attorneys in the team who were playing a procurement role. If you constrain the opportunity by looking for a specific skill set, you're naturally going to have challenges.
Okay.
Just keep an open mind, kind of expand. I had somebody come join the team from marketing, internal transfers. Because they saw the value. I sold them on the opportunity. Yeah. That gets back to the sales role, but I sold them on the opportunity, had them join while they were in the group for 5 years, and then left.
Yeah.
And went back to marketing. But to your earlier point, I now had an evangelist within marketing, an advocate,
right,
who helped me do my job better. Mm-hmm. She had a greater appreciation for what procurement was about, what the opportunities were, how to negotiate better outcomes. So in the end, it was a win-win. So again, I think if you just keep an open mind and get creative as far as what talent you want to attract,
yeah,
and then have a program, I don't want to say indoctrinate, maybe assimilate is a better way of describing it, into kind of the procurement function that will make them successful and you successful.
So teaching people, for example, some of the technical skills that we may have looked for as basics before, they're actually secondary to some of those softer skills that are a lot harder to teach, and you can teach them procurement skills.
Exactly, yeah.
Does that mean there's a bigger focus on training and retention?
Definitely on training. It's interesting, retention. My philosophy is, regardless of skill set, hire the best resource, train them, invest in them, and then from a retention standpoint, if they leave, they become an advocate.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
And actually, it's not my philosophy. It's something that I've mimicked from a CFO at one of my prior companies. Very much subscribed to the philosophy of he wanted to have everyone with the capability of becoming a CFO, leaving the organization and then becoming an advocate for not only the discipline, but for Salesforce. Mm-hmm. So, so it's something that I've just been mimicking ever since. But great philosophy.
What's the risk of doing nothing? Do we risk being bypassed ultimately because we don't have the people that we need to drive ourselves forward in terms of helping the business, or do we risk being automated out?
It's not being relevant.
Yeah. To
be very blunt, with lack of relevancy becomes redundancy, which is a reduction in force. So, it's really appreciating the culture that you're in, understanding the skills that you need to complement, operate within that culture, and kind of really having those soft skills, to your earlier comment, to be more effective in selling the relationships, building the relationships. You look at kind of the competencies for a procurement professional. And I hadn't really given thought until we just started having the conversation. So, the ability to negotiate successful outcomes, the ability to read and redline a contract, the ability to build relationship. If you were to stack rank those, it's almost the inverse. In my opinion, the soft skills are now more important within the procurement function than some of those technical skills.
So for a professional who's been in the function for a long time that has the technical skills, how can they react to that? Or how have you seen professionals who have those technical skills be successful in developing the softer skills that have allowed them to then move on?
It gets back to the conversation of relevancy, right? They'll quickly realize if they don't have those soft skills, the function becomes less and less relevant. Something I've always done throughout my career is I've always stayed current on the job profile that I aspire to. Back in the day, there was an author called, I'm probably going to butcher the name, it's been a while, Dress for Success, John Malloy. So his philosophy was, don't dress to the level that you're operating at, dress to the level you aspire to. Simple philosophy that applies to how you develop your skill set. Don't develop your skill set to the level that you're playing, to the level you aspire to. So the best way of doing that is staying current on job functions, job postings, developing a peer network, understanding, what the peer level that you aspire to, kind of how they operate, what their strengths are, their weaknesses, doing that SWOT analysis. So that's been a philosophy that ever since I read Dress for Success, that I've kind of incorporated into my career pathing.
So as a CPO, when you're looking across your teams and you're thinking, as you're looking at talent planning, who really stands out from the crowd and who you have confidence to take to the next level, what are you looking for? What do those people do that others don't?
Yeah, and this gets back to the environment, the culture that you're operating in. I joined a company, VSP Global, that has well-tenured staff. It's beyond me. Individuals been there 26, 28 years, which is unheard of in the industry. Having come from high tech, if you can retain talent for a period of 2 to 4 years, check the box.
You're
that's
doing a
successful.
good job. Right.
So it has given me a new perspective on how to identify and grow talent within the team. So I quickly realized I needed to complement the team's talents in a number of ways. So I had the senior director of IT join the procurement team. I had another, if you will, opportunity around project management. So I had somebody PMP certified join the team and is a manager within the team. So it's really kind of doing that skill set assessment, partnering with third party to get their point of view, but to do your own assessment of the team and developing a game plan from an organizational development standpoint on how do I complement the talents within the team internally as well as externally. And that's the journey that I've been on now for the last 2.5 years at VSP. But it's similar to what has occurred over my career at my prior companies. It's key to do the skill set assessment, identify deficiencies, and figure out a plan to complement.
So you talked about working with a lot of well-tenured professionals who may not have the same breadth of experience from an organizational perspective. Do you give that a certain amount of time to see if people have the ability to change? Or do you shift them into positions that are better suited to what their experience level is? How do you kind of manage that? Because I imagine it's a bit of a jigsaw.
It is a bit of a jigsaw and a great organizational development question. I mean, you want to put people into roles that will challenge them. Challenge them in a healthy way, not challenge them to fail. Right? So part of it is, these are the needs of the organization, needs of the team. This is my skill set, assessment. Are you a good fit? Is it going to challenge you in a healthy way? And then I'll have those conversations. I've transited. It's funny. One of my best hires was at Oracle, individual that played NCAA basketball. Had no procurement technology background. And hired her because I knew that she was naturally competitive. I knew that she had kind of the competency level to learn quickly. And she's in a senior role at Oracle today, playing a technology role.
Right.
And just because of her can-do attitude allowed her to be successful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really providing an opportunity for somebody, giving them a challenging role in a healthy way. But I've also, to be totally transparent, I put people in roles that will challenge them, and being very authentic with them to say, you know, this is going to be make it or break it with you. So grab the opportunity. I'll invest. I'll give you the training that you need, internal, external. But if it's not successful, I'll be your best reference.
Right.
And you have to jettison people.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's kind of the difficult part of a leadership role.
Right.
But it is very rewarding when you have somebody kind of accept it, do it, and be successful at it. Yep.
So for those that aspire to be a CPO, and let's say they're a manager or director level, what kind of actions do you recommend that they should take in their careers to really start increasing their chances of working up the ladder to becoming a CPO?
We call them IDPs, individual development plans. It's funny, everyone has their acronym. Back in the day, it was MBOs, Management by Objectives.
Right.
At Salesforce, it's V2MOM, Vision, still indelible. It's Vision, Values, Methods, Obstacles, Measures.
Right.
At VSP, it's KJs, Key Job Accomplishments, tethered with an IDP, Individual Development Plan. So on an annual basis, I sit down with the team. We put KJs in place. They're SMART, specific, measurable, actionable, results, et cetera. But also the IDP. We put development plans in play. And we sit down, we have a conversation, and I'm real with people. I say, what do you want to become?
Yeah.
How do we need to invest? And how can we make that happen? And it's having those heart-to-heart discussions with people that generally have very successful outcomes.
How do you motivate high potential players who may be demotivated either because of circumstances around them, or they feel that they're not getting the recognition they deserve, or that they're not in a role that challenges them?
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's not in my experience, it's not so there's the hypos that have lack of engagement that become a challenge. There's also what I would call the people that have achieved a certain level of complacency, and they don't recognize kind of the value that they can bring to the table or the needs of the organization. It's having that pep talk with those people that, in my opinion, can be more challenging conversation, because with that level of complacency, they may have reached a point where they've accepted it, no longer motivated, or they're in denial and they don't appreciate kind of the sounds harsh, but their shelf life, right? How much longer they're going to be in the organization. So there's those two groups of people. I would say that so-called complacents or the steady eddies are the more challenging. But to your point, having a hypo not realize their full potential because the environment, the lack of engagement, whatever those factors are. I mean, in my career, those have been the easier conversations. It's the complacent ones that have been more challenging.
Right. And is that then about driving them to change? Just, I don't want to say, well, I will, I guess, snapping out of the complacency.
That's where it gets back to the selling, right? You have to become your own cheerleader within the organization and really educate people on what the opportunities are for them, for their family, understand what's important to them, work-life balance, career development, whatever that might be, and appealing to them on those levels and really sorting out what motivates them. Certainly with somebody that's complacent, it's more challenging because it's difficult to discern the motivators, right? But I have found that if you sit with somebody, you're real with them, you're authentic, and you appeal to them from this is the needs of the organization, this is where I see you playing a role, this is how I see you developing your career path going forward, people will generally be receptive. And if they're not, do you really want them in the organization?
They're already past the point of no return.
Yeah.
How, as you look to hiring, how important is the diversity of somebody's experiences? And it can be inside and outside of procurement, but it could also just be around different functions of the procurement value chain. Is that something that you look for particularly?
Yeah, definitely. More important today than 30 years ago.
Yeah.
30 years ago, given the environment, you could be a subject matter expert within a space. You want the diversity, you want the generalist, in my opinion. It's certainly if you're supporting your IT organization and it requires somebody to have that in-depth knowledge around, memory, data centers, storage, servers, whatever that might be. Yeah, maybe you either hire it or develop it. But it really becomes more about partnering with the business to draw on that subject matter expertise, you having the soft skills, the relationship building skills, and that's kind of what my focus has been on.
So that you're not a risk, you're not perceived as a risk by the business when you're actually going to them and asking them for help, acknowledging that you don't know everything.
Right.
But if you have a breadth of experience, at least it gives you a bit more maturity in terms of how you think about approaching that.
Yeah, and a lot of times, too, being seasoned in how to manage through those situations, through the relationship. Even if you don't possess the SME, the subject matter expertise, I would still place my bet that individual will have a successful outcome.
Right. Well, I want to just move into a final question, and it's more tactical. And that's, a lot of times we struggle to build relationships and become relevant to our stakeholders just in our day-to-day activities. What's one thing that you recommend to your team in how they can start becoming relevant to their stakeholders?
Sit with the business, understand what their challenges are, look at the opportunity from their perspective. I'm not suggesting compromise your values, compromise your ethics, but I'm saying go meet with the business, spend a week, a month learning what their challenges are. Living the opportunity from their seat, their view of what those challenges are, and I think having that appreciation makes you more effective. It's a simple skill, but I think what happens is people just get involved in the churn of the day, and they default to their point of view and not fully appreciating the I don't want to say opposing, but the opposite view.
And does some of that then come into how, as a leader, you're setting the objectives of the professionals? Because then they're ultimately going to revert back to type in terms of, well, if my objective is cost savings, then at the end of the day, that's what I'm going to be focused on.
Yeah, interesting. I have a simple message to the team. If I get up out of my chair to go to the restroom, to go to the cafe, I don't want to see anyone here. Right? Simple message. Get out of your seat, go meet with the business, live with the business, come back for a meeting, right? But I don't want to see you. Simple message. And it's interesting. So some people get it, and you have to moderate it, obviously. They have to deliver. You have to have expectations aligned, measures in place to make sure that they're being successful and not out, playing hooky or golf, whatever the case may be. But the professionals get it, right? And they'll perform. And those are the people, end of day, that you want to surround yourself with. And through those conversations, it's interesting, I'm sorry, back in my days, 15 years ago, we bifurcated transactional from strategic, right? Day one, before that happened, people were doing both, right? And human behavior is interesting. If somebody has competency around doing something, they'll gravitate towards it. And what I quickly realized is a lot of the individuals on that team were transactionally focused. They were tactical, right? And you can't just go in and anoint somebody and say, changes happened. Day two, you're now strategic. You have to develop it, you have to build it, and you have to place expectations on them that they're no longer playing that role. And these are the expectations now that you're expected to deliver to. And I didn't do that. It was a key lesson now that I've incorporated going forward. But because, a week, year, 2 years into the process, they were still gravitating towards those transactional responsibilities because that's where their comfort was. And it really changed how I hired and developed, retained talent. So it's been a key lesson for me. So, being a leader in the procurement space, you really have to adapt, be flexible, once you become, stoic, stationary, sedentary in your role, you're no longer relevant.
Right. I have actually another question that came out of that. It kind of goes at a tangent, but you talked about the separation of transactional and strategic.
Yep.
And I'm interested from a CPO's perspective, is that going to continue at a faster pace, and especially as we start talking about technology and the things that the technology can do for some of those transactional and administrative tasks, and would it even change what we view as being strategic ultimately?
Yeah, it's interesting. So robotic procurement,
the
artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's been around a long time.
Okay.
If you order off catalog, you can auto-generate the PO. Buyer doesn't touch it. You can build price breaks into kind of your underlying structure within the PO generation.
Yep.
So all of that's been there, right? What the procurement function, what I've seen is the shift away from the technical, tactical to the strategic and development of soft skills. I've seen it, I've lived it. And those organizations that haven't kind of gotten on that bandwagon are the ones that are no longer relevant, right? Somebody's out of a job.
Right.
So that shift has occurred, and technology has been a key enabler to make that happen. So when people talk about robotic or IA within the procurement space, I would say that's blasé, it's already happened. We're now trying to figure out how we can further leverage it, right? And maybe through enabling sourcing tools and giving them to the business and becoming an overseer is the next shift. I was talking to somebody at one of the big fours, and the irony, there's always this constant shift. Back in the day, it was around total quality management, TQM, right? And then they just rebranded it, and it's called something else nowadays. So now the focus from a big four perspective is on post-award contract management. So it's not tools, it's managing the contract, which procurement's naturally moved away from because we just consummate the deal and turn it over to the business. You go manage it. You talk to me when you have a problem. But so there's this shift now back to procurement engaging around contract management. And it's keeping current on those trends that becomes a challenge for the CPO.
So here's one last thing that I have that's segues from that, I guess, that I'm interested in. Again, not necessarily related to hiring, but interested in your perspective. And that's you talk about post-contract award and, what we think of supplier relationship management.
Yep.
SRM, my perspective, it was really just another way to beat up a supplier that, we didn't have power with in the relationship. So we're starting to talk more about collaboration.
Right.
Are we moving there? Is it something we'd like to move to, but we don't really know how? Where do you see that kind of fitting into our future?
So there's a professor at University of Tennessee that talked about vested outsourcing.
Okay, Kate.
Yep. So the whole concept of vested outsourcing, think about taking that concept and putting it into supplier relationship management. So part of my career at Salesforce, I was managing all of the outsourced tech support. And what we did is we used Chatter, which is Salesforce tool, and we created open conversation, open collaboration with the supplier. So we do all of our contract negotiations, put the contract into the Chatter tool. We'd create a group. All of our performance measures in the tool. We try to create a many-to-many or a multi-threaded conversation, as I like to refer to it. And I think it was kind of early. And I'm surprised when people talk about SRM, they talk about supplier information management. They talk about getting access to, POs, to an invoice, what's my payment. And that is so kind of archaic, right? It needs to be more about collaboration, collaborating and doing it in such a way that the conversation is open and granting access to others to contribute, making documents referenceable. So if I have a contract in Chatter and I change something, it provides notice to the other party that something's been changed. If I post something, they get notice that I posted something.
It's like bringing transparency to the relationship.
And that's where the conversation needs to go. We even started to, across that outsourcing community, 3-4 different suppliers, posting everyone's performance results.
Interesting.
And driving behavior through transparency. So I would know how you're performing. I would know what line of business or book of business that you had, you would know what I had. And if I wanted to encroach on your book of business, I easily could see how you were performing and develop my value prop to the buyer to make that value statement. So you're driving competition through kind of collaboration and driving the right behaviors, because now there's transparency.
Right.
That's where we need to go.
Right.
I don't think we're there yet.
No. Well, I have a ton of other questions I could probably go in that direction, because I just love speaking to you and getting kind of your perspective as a CPO, but time is against us. So I just want to thank you, Greg, for taking part in our conversation, and just thank you for your time today.
Phil, it's been a pleasure. Best of luck to you.
Thank you very much. And
all right.
I will link up to the show notes for today's episode. They're going to be at artofprocurement.com/Greg. That'll be, you can download the audio file from today and check out some of the lessons that I learned from the conversation. So that's artofprocurement.com/Greg. So Greg, thanks again.
Thank you, Phil.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.